Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. The kitchen tap coughed twice, then died mid-gulp. I grabbed my boots in the toolbox by reflex. Outside, the storm clawed at the fence in my ears. A dull grinding rose from the curb box too close. I'm Alex, 34, and I knew that sound too well. A valve under strain makes a throatier grind than ice. My stomach tightened as the pressure gauge memory flashed. Someone was forcing my line in the dark now. I cut the house main fast, wrist stiff from cold. The pipes settled, then kicked once like a trapped animal. Silence should have followed, but the grinding got meaner. Whoever was out there kept turning hard. I crossed the yard in short steps, weight low. The snow hid the edges, and I did not trust them. Every footfall snapped like glass under felt soles. The noise shifted right near my meter lid closer. A shovel scraped metal, one shove then another. Breath punched out in bursts that timed with the scraping. My lamp found edges and a gloved wrist jerking. The wrist froze, then tightened around a wrench committed. Hey, I kept my voice flat and loud. The wrist flinched, then the wrench twisted anyway. My line shuddered through the ground like a warning shot. I moved to the side and measured distance, 2 strides. Stop, I said, boots planted and shoulders square. The figure turned just enough to show a hard profile. New neighbor, sharp jaw, eyes on the tool, not me. She leaned in and chased leverage, reckless. You are closing my water, I said through chattering teeth. She reached for the slot again and ignored the shake. The handle fought her, then gave a fraction with a pop. My tongue tasted panic and I stepped in closer. Back away, she kept her gaze nailed to the slot. Your run floods my drive, open your taps and drain it. Her breath steamed as if punctuation to that order. She twisted and the valve screamed through the box, galling. I wanted to yank the wrench and end it fast. Every part of me pictured a snapped stem and disaster. The storm would pour straight through my life if she won. I checked angles and reached for the shovel gamble. She kicked the shovel heel to pin my hand down. Her glove missed and I flicked the handle up. The tip bumped the wrench and broke her set. She cursed under breath and lunged for the slot again. The ground lurched as a buried joint flexed under force. That jolt carried up my legs and into my jaw. She felt it too because her shoulders stiffened an inch. Neither of us blinked and the wind baited us hard. Emergency crew is minutes away if you keep going. I did not have a phone in hand yet. I said it anyway and held her eyes steady. She smiled like a dare and bore down long. The wrench slipped and clanged, then bit with an ugly catch. Pressure would freefall if that catch jumped its track. I braced the shovel under the handle to wedge it. She felt the block and hissed through clenched teeth, challenge. This started as water and weather, but it shifted. I was not defending a pipe anymore, but a boundary. She was not fixing a problem, but testing control. The line understood before I did. I heard it waiting. I pushed the shovel, she leaned, the wrench groaned. A crack spidered from somewhere I could not see. We both paused because the ground told us to. Then she moved first, and I knew the next second mattered. She lunged for the handle and drove her weight down. Metal scraped bone through the ground and lit my teeth. I wedged the spade under the bar and lifted hard. The tool bounced free and spun in the snow wild. She grabbed for it with a quick hook of her boot. I feinted left and stepped right to box her out. Her breath hitched and she went for the access cap. Her glove slipped on ice and she cursed short and low. Hands off my line, I set my stance and raised the spade. She squared her shoulders like a wall about to move. Your runoff froze my drive, she shot back, eyes locked. She reached again as if my words were air thin. I kicked the bar away and it thudded near the hedge. She tracked it, then tracked me, then picked the cap. Her fingers pried at the rim and found purchase. A faint click told me the seal was already gone, tampered. That tiny click mattered more than the storm. A city lock should rattle like a bell when intact. This cover was naked and ready for any amateur. Whoever stripped it planned to return tonight. Do not touch that, I pointed at the naked slot. She glanced at my hand and then at the opening. Then drain your system or I finish this job. She planted her knees and leaned in, committed. I shifted closer and kept my boot near the opening. Her elbow bumped my shin and she hissed a warning. The bar lay astride away like a loaded answer. I had a choice in no time, block or call. Emergency works, I said and raised my phone halfway. Her eyes flicked to the screen for a fraction. She shoved the cap aside and reached into the hole. Metal met metal and the whole yard tightened. Danger. I jammed the spade across the opening like a gate. The bar clipped the blade and the shock numbed my palm. She yanked once and the bar skated off the edge. The slot was still aligned with the stem barely. A new sound crept up through the ground, uneven thumps. Not pressure, not wind, not steps from a passerby. It felt like water surging and choking on debris. Something inside the run was already failing. Prelude. Your fix makes it worse. I kept my jaw steady. She wiped her glove on her coat and glared hard. Your line crosses my property and floods my slab. She reached again and I met her wrist midair clash. Her glove twisted in my grip and she snapped her arm free. Snow whipped across our faces and stole our balance. She charged the opening and I slipped left on the crust. My heel skidded and the spade bit my shin sting. The bar found the slot and bit with an ugly hold. She leaned and the handle bowed, then straightened with a jolt. A sour scrape rang up the stem like a warning bell. One more push would shear something I could not replace, ever. Walk away for 5 minutes, I lowered the spade an inch. She laughed without amusement and pressed down harder. The handle twitched, then stuck, then twitched again, bad rhythm. I tasted iron and braced for a crack imminent. I changed tactics and pressed the spade under her forearm. The leverage stole half her strength and she swore. She tried to reset her grip and I shifted my weight. The handle hovered, then held, then trembled on the edge. A siren wailed far off and both of us froze. Her eyes darted toward the street like a guilty reflex. You called them already, her lip curled like a hook. I let the lie hang and watched her calculation fast. She snatched the bar free and backed 2 steps, measuring. The opening gaped at us like a dare we both heard. A thin jet hissed up from the seam and iced my boot. The pipe was hurt and it blamed both of us quietly. Back up, I said and edged my leg from the spray. She ignored the warning and leaned for the bar again. I slapped my palm over the slot and felt cold steel. She hesitated and the moment cracked open. Choice. Look at your gutter, I said and jerked my chin. Her head snapped that way and a slurry spilled past. The stream had cut a trench toward the shared boundary. Her jaw twitched and then set stubborn. That flow started after your valve stunt, I pushed. Her glare shook but her hands stayed on the bar. A bead ran from the rim and hardened on contact. I pictured a sheet of ice by sunrise, liability. A light flared 2 houses down and moved our way. A neighbor trudged through the drift with a scarf pulled high. He raised a hand but did not step closer to us. He saw the tools and he saw the opening and he stopped. Everything all right out there, his voice carried like a test. Call water emergency now, I answered without looking. He fumbled with his phone and nodded at my stance. She watched him and tightened her grip, cornered. She went for the handle again but faster this time. I drove the spade under and torqued with everything I had. The bar popped loose with a metallic bark and spun out. It skittered across ice and came to rest just beyond reach. She darted after it and I planted over the opening. My boot straddled the slot and my palm covered steel. The hiss from below rose to a harsh needle. The seal inside was shaving itself to dust. Countdown. Step away from the box, the neighbor called, voice firmer. He had someone on speaker and they were asking for details. 2 adults, tools near City Hardware, line compromised. I stared at her and felt a decision land now. I will not lose water tonight, I said almost calm. You move again and I record every inch from here. My camera lens flicked to life with a soft chirp. She heard it and recoiled like it had teeth finally. She tried one more angle and tested my balance with a shove. I did not give an inch and the shovel dug deep. The hiss ticked louder and a fine spray kissed my ankle. We were seconds from a fountain and both of us knew it. The shutoff box belched water and punched my knees sideways. A white jet climbed and turned my yard into glass. I slammed the lid halfway over to deflect the blast. She flinched back but kept her eyes on the keyway, hungry. The stream knifed across my boot and numbed my ankle. I drove the digging blade into packed snow as a brace. The lid rattled against the flow and spit angry beads. We both blinked through needles of ice and chose our next move fast. Emergency line now, I lifted my phone and hit dial. She watched my thumb rise and her jaw worked calculating. The operator answered and caught the roar through the mic. Main disturbed, pressure falling, 2 people on site, I said flat. She made a bold reach toward the half-closed cover. I kicked the hinge edge and pinched her glove away. Her wrist snapped back and she bared her teeth in silence. The jet tilted and sprayed toward the sidewalk. Danger. A light bobbed at the corner and drew closer with care. The neighbor from earlier hovered near the curb, wide stance. They are en route, he called, breath feathering hard. He filmed the scene and kept a wide frame witness. She lunged again with a short, brutal shove of her shoulder. The lid creaked sideways and the stream swerved left. A thin sheet spread toward the street like spilled varnish. Cars would skate if this kept growing. Liability. Back off the hardware, my voice came out low and steady. I raised the camera and caught her glove near the keyway. She froze long enough for the red dot to blink. Her gaze slid to the neighbor and then back, cornered. Sirens rolled nearer and split the night into beats. A municipal truck slid in and stopped at an angle. 2 workers jumped down and a long rod flashed between them. Clear the box, one barked, boots cutting grooves. Authority. I yanked the lid aside and stepped wide of the torrent. They speared the rod into the deeper seat with practiced hands. Hold distance, the other warned, eyes never leaving the slot. Metal turned with a groan I felt through my soles closing. The roar softened to a harsh rush and then a stubborn spit. They leaned once more and the flow slumped to a sulk. The yard sighed like it had held its breath too long. Steam rose and then vanished into the storm, uneasy. Who touched city gear? The foreman pointed at the open box. She lifted her chin and smoothed her coat with slow strokes. He refused to drain his line and flooded my drive, she threw. Her tone tried to land as righteous but slipped thin. I held the screen up and moved it into his light. The clip showed her torquing in real time and unblinking. The neighbor's angle caught the first geyser in her boot. The foreman watched once and nodded without comment, decided. He crouched and traced the clean scar where the seal should live. Lock missing, seat damaged, he muttered for his partner. They fitted a temporary cap and spun it tight with care. One worker read numbers into a radio and waited, grim. Name and lot number, his pen hovered near the page. She stared at the ice and pressed her lips together. He repeated the request and the pause grew teeth. She finally spoke and the pen scratched like a verdict, sharp. I felt anger drop a few degrees and turn into resolve. No yelling, no grand speech, just breaths that steadied. Rules were here now and I was done playing nice. The jet had written a line I would not cross ever. Crews will return with a proper valve tomorrow, the foreman said. Do not touch this enclosure again under any condition. He looked straight at her and then at me for a beat. He left a notice on my step and pointed at it, wait. The truck rolled away and the yard settled into broken silence. She lingered by her walk with hands deep in her pockets. Our eyes met and something colder than the storm passed between us. Not over, not by a long shot, promise. Her fist hammered my door before the truck cleared the corner. I opened on the chain and met her stare without a word. Let me inside to check your faucets, she pushed the gap. I shut it and clicked the deadbolt, line drawn. Bootsteps crunched behind her and the neighbor hovered again. Crews capped it, he offered, like a bridge I would not cross. She turned on him with a stare that scraped. I filmed her fingers jabbing toward my handle, evidence. She marched to the curb box and towed the notice. Temporary means unsafe, she called without looking back. She bent as if testing the cap with a knuckle. I stepped beside her and lifted my phone close. Do not touch city hardware, my breath fogged the warning. She straightened and smiled like she had time to waste. Then open your taps and bleed the pressure for hours. The cap hissed a faint whisper that made us both listen. I dialed the emergency line and held it to the air. They left a seep, I reported with the street and lot. Dispatch logged it and promised a follow-up, no delay implied. I felt the night tilt toward escalation again, inevitable. She started pacing the property line, counting strides out loud. Your service runs under my garden, she tossed like a grenade. Tomorrow I trench it myself if they stall. The neighbor filmed her pacing like a metronome, steady. Touch my service and you face charges. I kept it level. She laughed once and wiped slush off her sleeve. Prove whose soil it crosses without surveys, she threw. I caught the bluff and saved it for morning, loaded. A patrol car rolled in slow and angled to the curb. The officer stepped out and took in the frozen sheet. Who called about interference? His voice cut through the storm. We both answered and the tie went to the camera. I played the clip with the wrench in the first burst. The officer watched my screen and then the neighbor's angle. He looked at the cap and the notice taped. "Lon, do not approach this lid again," he told her plain. She pivoted to the officer with a tight smile. "He blocked drainage and iced my drive," she argued quick. The officer checked the slope with his boot and nodded once. He asked for her details and wrote them down slow. While he wrote, the whisper from the cap got louder. A thin spray found a new seam and licked across ice. I grabbed a bag of salt by instinct, then stopped. The officer eyed me and held up a hand. "Wait. Utilities will handle the lake," he said and radioed. He positioned his car to block the worst sheet. She folded her arms and watched the water creep. I watched her shoes inch closer to the cover, testing. Her heel nudged the rim and the whisper sharpened. "Step back now," the officer warned with a palm raised. She hesitated and I saw the choice harden behind her gaze. She retreated 2 steps and stared at me, burning. The truck returned faster than I expected and parked crosswise. Different crew this time with insulated gloves and tired eyes. They pulled the cap and reached deeper with a heavier key. The sound from below changed to a hollow grind treble. "Seat is scored," one muttered for his partner only. They hauled out a clamp and a secondary shutoff tool. The leader glanced at the officer and then at me, calm. "We need clear space and no interference," he announced firm. I backed away 3 paces and kept the camera running. She hovered near her walkway and bit her lip. The neighbor shuffled to my side and whispered. "Get their badge numbers now," he breathed practical. I asked for names and got them without fuss. They cranked the buried gate until the hiss died flat. Silence dropped like a lid on a boiling pot, final for now. Steam drifted and the team started notes, methodical. "Valve body compromised by unauthorized operation," the leader recorded. "Lock missing prior to our arrival," he added for completeness. He pointed at the officer's dash cam and nodded once. Every angle had the same story, now clean. They installed a tamper collar that bit over the rim. A seal clip snapped with a sharp tick I felt in my teeth. He handed me a printed warning and kept another copy. The officer took a photo of both, extra stone on the pile. She shifted her weight like she might try one last stunt. The collar glinted with a barcode and a tracker dot. She saw the tiny lens and froze mid-breath. Her game changed without words and I watched it happen. "Water is secure," the leader said and capped his pen. "Any further manipulation triggers an alert," he added dry. He glanced at her only long enough to make it clear. The crew left and the patrol taillights followed quiet. I stood in the churned snow and felt the throb ease. Anger cooled into structure and I liked the shape. I would document every minute until repairs finished. I would not blink first again, ever. She turned toward her door and paused on the step. "This is not finished," she tossed over her shoulder. I believed her and that honesty did me a favor. I went inside and laid out a plan, hard edges. A hollow thud rippled through my wall before sunrise. Pipes ticked in sequence like knuckles along a table. Another thud hit and the copper rang with warning. I grabbed my coat and ran for the basement, braced. A seam on the feed line bulged like a blister. Frost crawled along the bend and made decisions for me. I cracked the drain and heard air pull through hard. The bulge quivered and held for now. Footfalls outside crossed my side yard fast and careless. I climbed 2 steps and peered through the glass. She hauled a length of corrugated hose toward the border. Its mouth pointed straight at my foundation, planned. "Move that runoff away from my house," I pushed the door. She kept dragging the coil like she hadn't heard a sound. Water sluiced from her downspout and fed the hose mouth. A ribbon aimed dead at my crawl vent, malice. I started the camera and walked to the property stakes. "Redirect that flow now," I said with both hands visible. She flicked a glance at my lens and twisted the hose. The stream hit the vent and splattered back, taunt. I snapped a still of the spray as it hit the grate. Then I pivoted toward the service hatch in the snow. The security collar blinked a faint status light. No alert cried out good and also not enough. Inside again, the feed joint creaked under its ice skin. I opened the highest tap a quarter turn for relief. A tired cough came from upstairs and stuttered. The bulge eased a hair, then swelled again, stubborn. I killed power to the nearby loop and breathed out. Metal pinged as temperatures shifted in grudging steps. The line calmed just enough to make me doubt. Doubt never fixed anything back outside. She had wedged the hose under a landscaping brick. The stream still hammered my vent like a battering ram. I kicked the brick free and the jet swung wild. She lunged, grabbed the coil and squared up. Viant, your runoff stops here, I pointed toward her driveway trench. Use your own drain to solve your issue. She yanked the hose toward the curb like a tug of war. The coil slipped and slapped the ground, messy escalation. Touch my drainage again and we have a bigger problem. Her jaw worked and she took a single step closer. You made a rink out here, she snapped without blinking. I scanned the asphalt and logged the slick patches evidence. Fresh tire tracks skated across the glaze near the corner. A car crawled by and fishtailed once before correcting. That image made the choice clean and immediate. I dialed the non-emergency line and spoke clearly formal. Neighbor diverting water onto my foundation, I reported. Prior interference with municipal hardware documented, I added crisp. Active storm and roadway hazard developing, I finished. The dispatcher confirmed a unit en route, measured urgency. Back downstairs, the feed joint ticked like a metronome. A thin weep formed and jeweled the underside. I pressed a wooden wedge between joist and pipe, steady pressure. The weep slowed but refused to quit countdown. Boots hit the porch and a knock followed with purpose. The same officer entered the yard and clocked the hose. He angled his body between us like a barrier. Explain this setup, his tone left no wiggle. She spun a story about blocked drainage and selfish neighbors. He walked the grade with small, precise steps. He pointed at her trench and then at my vent cover. Redirect to the gutter line, he ordered without frills. She stared at the coil and then at me with heat. I held the camera where he could see the feed. He radioed the city line and asked for an inspector. My pulse slowed a notch while the pipe upstairs ticked, warning still. She yanked the hose toward the curb with jerky motions. The stream swung to the street and hissed along the edge. The officer watched until it stayed off my wall. He noted something in his book and looked up, final for now. The knock inside my home returned sharper and meaner. A pop echoed through the basement like a snapped twig. Water traced a line down the seam and quickened. I swallowed a curse and tightened the wedge, not enough. Water inside, I called to the officer from the door. He peered past me and saw the shimmer under the pipe. Crews are minutes out, he answered and keyed his mic. I crouched lower and shifted the brace, one more try. The drip thickened into a narrow stream and angled down. I slid a bucket under the run and steadied my hands. The wood pressed the copper and the stream thinned. It held, but only while I held human clamp. Boot ruts hit my steps and the municipal team returned. They took one look at the interior line and nodded. Back off half a step, the lead instructed with focus. He fitted a split repair sleeve and tightened fast, efficient. The stream pinched to nothing and then to a faint damp. He tapped the metal once and listened for hidden rattles. Tampering upstream stressed your branch, he said, blunt and sure. I met his gaze and kept my mouth shut, logged. They moved outside to the service box with measured care. A portable antenna chirped as they scanned the seal. No breach since install, the tech confirmed into his radio. He wrote a lot number on the notice and underlined twice. The officer approached her porch and waited until she turned. You will route your water to the curb cut, he stated flat. Any diversion onto their structure earns a citation. She held still for 3 slow breaths and then nodded barely. I felt something shift inside me like a ratchet. Not victory, not relief, but a clean new setting. I would not react on her timeline again. I would choose the ground and the terms starting now. The crew chief handed me a repair slip with times. He pointed at the camera on the service housing. Any alert pings our desk and patrol, he said. My shoulders finally dropped a fraction, useful leverage. She lingered by her walk and traced lines in the slush. Our eyes met and no one spoke for a beat. Then she lifted her phone and aimed at my window. The game tilted a degree in a fresh direction. Her phone flashed at my window and I lifted mine higher. We recorded each other like dueling mirrors, both unblinking. I stepped onto the porch and pointed to the service housing. Any tamper ping brings them back fast, I said, warning sharpened. She smiled without humor and swung the camera toward the road. You blocked my drainage and wrecked my morning, she snapped. Your story is falling apart, I answered and kept steady. The housing blinked its small status light like a heartbeat waiting. A truck growled from the corner and rolled to a stop. Logos matched the earlier crew, but faces were new. A clipboard appeared and a laser level clicked on. Final repair under emergency order, the foreman announced, clean cut. I guided them to the curb while keeping her in FR. Lame. They measured the grade and chalked out a narrow trench. Short isolate, pull and replace, restore service, one recited softly. The foreman glanced at my camera and nodded once, proceed. She hovered near her walk and muttered about trespass. The officer from earlier reappeared and waved her back. Work zone established, he said while setting cones. His boots planted between her and the crew line held. The crew set the puller and killed the branch pressure. A torpedo heater rumbled to soften the frozen patch. Steam rose in bursts, then cleared as the soil gave. They opened the ground with smooth, practiced motions, surgical pace. Document the old seat before disposal, the foreman told his tech. A body cam blinked as the damaged hardware came out. The threads were chewed and the stop pin looked twisted. He photographed every angle and bagged the parts chain tight. She paced the property edge, counting again under her breath. Each number carried a challenge I had already declined. I did not chase her or answer the bait. I filmed the bag seal click shut, evidence preserved. Service restoration in 3, the tech called through his mask. He torqued the new assembly until it settled with certainty. The indicator flagged true and the gauge stabilized. I felt a knot inside me and tie one notch, only one. She pointed at my house and raised her volume for the street. His line still floods my slab, she proclaimed to no one. The officer lifted a hand and tilted his head. Prove active damage, he said with crisp patience, challenge set. I opened the basement and led the foreman inside. He checked the sleeve from earlier and listened close. Stable under current load, he confirmed after 2 breaths. He chalked the timestamp on my joist, clear and simple. Back outside, the crew fitted a tamper collar upgrade. This one hugged the housing like locking armor. A small disc glowed once as it armed. The foreman scanned it and checked his tablet, linked. Any rotation or lid lift triggers an alert, he explained. Alert dispatch goes to us and patrol instantly, he added. He handed me a printed receipt with incident numbers. I slid it into my coat and looked at her, message delivered. She pivoted hard and sprinted to her gutter trench. With quick jerks, she tried to steer the runoff back. The officer stepped in and pointed at the curb cut. Keep your flow directed away from that wall, his tone iron. She glared, then dragged the hose toward the street again. Water snaked along the channel and disappeared into the grate. No splash touched my foundation this time. She watched for spillover and found none, corner shrinking. The neighbor appeared with a fresh battery pack and a nod. He posted himself by his fence and kept filming. I felt less alone than an hour before. Not allies exactly, just witnesses who had seen enough, useful. The inspector's sedan slid in behind the truck with precision. He stepped out with a metal clipboard and calm eyes. Walk me through the sequence, he requested without fuss. We started at the trench and ended at the collar, start to finish. He compared timestamps across 4 devices in quick order. My clips, the neighbor's files, the officer's cam, the crew's log. Timeline consistent, he concluded without drama. He turned to her and asked for anything contrary. Silence met him. She lifted her phone like a shield and scrolled fast. No clip helped her, nothing showed damage before her interference. He waited 10 seconds and then closed the folder. Finding support enforcement, he said and clicked his pen, inevitable. The citation book opened with a stiff crack. Unauthorized operation of municipal shutoff, the first line landed. Creation of roadway hazard during storm, the second followed. Directed discharge toward neighboring structure, the third stacked, impact felt. Her mouth tightened as the numbers stacked under each item. She focused on the totals and lost color. The officer asked for a signature and pointed where. Her hand shook once before the pen touched ink committed. Restitution assessment pending part analysis, the inspector added. He lifted the bagged valve and angled it toward daylight. This pin did not fail from where, he noted steadily. Shear pattern matches forced rotation, he finished plain truth. A sound chirped from the collar like a bird. We all turned because it meant one thing now. A hand had tried the housing while we stood there. The foreman's tablet flashed with a grid ping recorded. The officer strode to the curb and scanned the area. A teen stood near the box with mittens half on. He backed up quickly and put his palms high. Curious, nothing more, he stammered as the officer waved him off. The alert cleared and the collar went quiet again. Still, the message settled into the block like winter. Touch the gear and the street pays attention. Even curiosity had consequences now, lesson taking root. The ends. Hector finished his photos and turned to us. Service restored, protective hardware installed, citations issued, he summarized. He gave me a thin sheet with repair appointments. Access required tomorrow for final meter swap, he added, schedule set. She hovered on her step and watched the signatures travel. Anger shifted under her expression to something bitter. I recognized the mix because I had felt it earlier. Powerlessness looking for a handle to grab, dangerous if fed. I kept my voice level and my words short. We can share a boundary without war, I offered. You bring concerns to the city first, I continued. You avoid my infrastructure and we avoid this, I finished, terms clear. She stared at my outstretched hand and chose not to take it. That choice told me exactly what the next weeks would be. Not chaos maybe, but friction that needed edges. I accepted it and let my hand fall, no chase. The crew packed up with quiet efficiency and left. The officer lingered to pass his card across the gap. Call if the collar chirps, he advised in a measured tone. He nodded to both houses and headed for his car, watchful exit. The neighbor slid his phone into a pocket and exhaled. You kept your cool, he offered like a verdict. I nodded because that had not been true before tonight. Inside, something had shifted from reactive to deliberate, real turn. I walked the basement once more with careful attention. The sleeve stayed dry and the wedge sat unused. I shut the drain and brought the system up gently. Every tap burped and then settled to a steady song, relief earned. Back above, I stood at the window and watched the street breathe. Her porch light cycled twice like a nervous tick. She opened the door, then shut it, then opened again. Indecision beat against the glass and found no purchase, stalling. I printed the repair log and tucked copies by the breaker. Phone numbers went on the fridge where I could reach fast. It was not paranoia anymore, it was procedure. Procedure kept houses standing when storms made people reckless, hard truth. A soft knock came from next door and I braced. Not her this time, a delivery left at the wrong address. I set it on her step and rang once. Through the curtain I saw movement, then stillness, truce for an hour. Night pressed in and the wind searched along the siding. I listened on purpose for the quiet where panic used to live. Not empty, not numb, just committed to a course. Boundaries feel like walls until they feel like doors, strange and right. I lay down and kept my boots by the mat. Prepared is not fear when the pattern has been proved. I closed my eyes and saw the collar blink once. Not a threat anymore, just a sentinel against old chaos, final for now. Morning brought a knock and the final meter swap. The team moved quick and left the new face sealed. We verified pressures and signed off on the work. As they left, the collar glowed and then slept, guardian at rest. She watched from her walkway with a stare I could not read. I met it without heat and without bait. Use the channels next time, I said through steady breath. That is how we keep the streets safe, I ended, simple and true. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again without words. That pause felt like a crack where light might form. Maybe not today, maybe not ever, but possible. I turned away before the opening closed on my terms. Winter kept raging and the pipes held their line. I checked the housing once each night, no more. Trust returned in small measured inches, never in leaps. That was enough for now, enough to sleep.